Hey guys, this is a loaded video that goes over champion changes in patch 8.17 and a comprehensive tier list that's supported by data from Lolalytics and our own analysis. Each lane will have their own tier list that's separated into 3 different tiers, and you can find the timestamps for each lane down below if you're interested in the lane that you main. We're also doing a $25 RP giveaway on this video. All you have to do to enter is subscribe to ProGuides and like and comment on this video. The winner will be selected in our next video this Friday. Fiora is a top lane bruiser that's doing quite well in the power rankings. A lot of her problems come from the fact that she's relying on dueling and being even or ahead. The change to this patch is giving her early game damage on her E, which is a major source of her trading power. This buff is great and we expect to see Fiora get an increase in her pick rate, but don't expect anything drastic. Garen is among the most picked top laners in Platinum plus Elo and boasts a ridiculous win rate at the same time. In short, he's pretty broken at the moment. This patch is giving him a very small slap on the wrist with a decrease to the damage on his Q. This nerf was so small that you should still continue to spin to win. Irelia is slowly making that transition from a mid laner into a flex solo laner. The alarming stat is that she's under 50% win rate in both solo lanes at the moment, and after getting hit with nerf after nerf, I guess it shouldn't surprise anyone. This patch is giving her a bit of her strength back with a buff onto her Q that makes it deal 100% of its damage to minions instead of 70%. This buff will help Irelia throughout the game and especially the early game. Yorick is beginning to emerge as a dominant top lane option because his Mistwalkers punish players that don't understand their mechanics. In a meta where lane phase is king, it makes sense that Yorick is on the rise. This patch is going to put the brakes on his rise by lowering his AD growth at early levels and giving it back in the late game. This is a sizable nerf because it stacks up as you level and it hits Yorick's strength, which is the early game. This is the top lane tier list, which features Darius, Jax, Sion, Poppy, and Kled in the S tier. There are plenty of A tier and even B tier champions that can slide into the S tier ranks when highly skilled players use them. However, the champions placed in our S tier are there for a reason. They're more than likely always a threat. The trend for top lane S tier champions appear to be tanky bruisers, so this is something to keep in mind. The main takeaway for this list is that any champion that you see here is viable to climb with and can be taken into high elos because top lane is feeling a bit more diverse at the moment. Nunu is completely reworked and will hopefully become a viable champion for junglers to choose. It's a little early to make claims about where Nunu ranks because there's a huge learning curve for many players since he's more of a control and tank jungler as opposed to a carry jungler. Look for us to rank Nunu in our next video. Wukong has slid down considerably in the power rankings due to a flurry of nerfs. He's now an inconsistent snowball champion that looks godly in one game and a feeder in the next. This patch is giving Wukong an attack speed buff that's going to give him more reliability by giving him a faster jungle clear. You shouldn't expect the success that Wukong has had a few patches ago, but it should be serviceable in the hands of a good player. Kayn is smack dab in the middle in rankings for all the viable junglers at the moment. This patch is going to give him a buff to his E by increasing the duration and movement speed bonus. It's scary to give Kayn more damage, so the next sensible thing is to give him mobility. Kayn mains should rejoice, and players that don't play Kayn won't feel inclined to learn him. Master Yi was not too long ago front and center of the gold funneling meta, but was quickly brought down to normal standards. His W is getting buffed this patch with a reduced cooldown and increased damage reduction at lower ranks. This is going to give Yi more early game playmaking potential without making him the overpowered force we don't want to see in every game. Rengar is one of those champions that is highly dependent on the player using him. Against a great Rengar player, we call OP, and against an average Rengar player, we say free win. To help out the average players, this patch is reducing the cooldown of his ultimates at rank 1 and 2. This gives players more opportunities to make plays without giving the skilled Rengar players the tools to 1v9. The jungle tier list is going to be up for debate because there are so many junglers that are great, but Graves, Evelynn, Kindred, Taliyah, and Xin Zhao are extremely consistent and take their place in the RS tier. There are plenty of junglers that can be added into this list, but these junglers have a high pick rate and win rate, which is not debatable. The trend for S tier junglers seem to be early game playmakers that transition into mid game carries. However, this does not mean that these are the only champions you can pick from. There are plenty of options you see here on this list. Some champions like Lee Sin and Rengar experience very high highs and pretty awful lows, so it's hard to put them into A tier because of general consistency. Overall for the jungle, it looks pretty stacked, so jungle mains should be pretty happy. Kassadin is the definition of an average mid lane champion when you look at stats. When games lasted longer, Kassadin was a monster because his ultimate scales really well. With these fast and snowbally games, Kassadin doesn't have the time to scale. This patch is going to help him by giving him a reduced cooldown at ranks 1 and 2 of his ultimate. This should be extremely helpful to Kassadin, but not a change that will give Kassadin a resurgence in the rankings. Annie is a household League of Legends mid laner that isn't quite pleasant to play against all the time. It's about to get a bit worse because her attack range is increasing to 625, which is about higher than everyone in the game. This change isn't going to push Annie into top tier contention, but it's just a buff that will probably help support Annie more. This is the mid lane champion tier list. The champions in the S tier are hard to place anywhere else, but the A and B tier seem interchangeable based on personal preference. The S tier features Ahri, Fizz, Twisted Fate, and Talon. All of the S tier champions are assassin-like and have similar goals in teamfights in the laning phase. There are a few champions in the A tier like Aurelion Sol and Akali that deserve an honorable mention because they can sometimes 1v9 games. Needless to say, the mid lane is stacked with a roster of many champions that can fit everyone's playstyle. Varus has been performing decently for an AD carry and has the pick rate to show for it. He has a great kit for organized play, but the key word here is organized. You need a team that plays around the fact that their AD carry has a hard engage ability at the cost of damage and mobility. This is why Varus' win rate is so low. This being said, Riot is mysteriously nerfing him this patch, reducing his base HP but buffing his HP growth. This change is an unneeded nerf and you should expect Varus to die a bit more in the early game moving forward. The AD carry tier list is pretty easy to make at the moment. AD carries are reigning supreme, and there's undeniable data backing this statement. The S tier is pretty clear at this time, and it's Jhin, Kai'Sa, Lucian, Draven, and Miss Fortune. These AD carries are head and shoulders above the rest, and are pretty much featured in every single one of your games. Collectively, they have consistency and scaling, which is all you really want from the AD carry role. The A and B tier are more clear-cut for this tier list than any other role. Specific players may have select champions that can move around in this list, but for the most part, this is what it is. Tarek's getting a minor change to his adaptive passive that will now default into physical damage. This change won't really amount to anything, so we'll go right into the tier list. The support tier list will always have a large amount of variety in every tier, which is what keeps the support role interesting. This time around, we're looking at champions that cover just about everything in the S tier, with Nami, Alistar, Leona, Pyke, and Morgana. These 5 supports are performing consistently and fit the meta very well. The rest of this list features strong champions, and if used in the right composition, can slide into the S tier. Supports are currently in a golden age in terms of being able to play a variety of archetypes.